work continues on this 1920s dress pattern from the Vintage Pattern Lending Library. In my last video, I cut out all of the fabric and dealt with the dress front darts and shoulder easing. Technically, those were steps 1 and 3. Here's step 2. Joining the dress front pieces to the dress back piece. I started by matching and pinning the tacked markings near the armhole. From there, it was just a row of pins straight down the side. This weird rectangular bump out near the hemline is for the box pleat. The technical term is apparently a pleat projection. The instructions are very clear about not sewing into this area just yet, which is why I only pinned the long vertical seams. I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize for wearing a shirt that clashes so horribly with the print of this mock-up. I am not sure how I did not notice that. I didn't turn the corner here because that would count as sewing into the pleat projection, and at this point, I was very good at following directions. Next, it was time to press the seams open as per the instructions and general sewing wisdom. I started by pressing them open with my fingers to avoid any mishaps with the iron. Aside from ensuring a nice crisp seam, pressing the garments at this stage helped me line up the box pleat successfully. But let's talk about pleats for a moment. The word pleat has been around since the 14th century, and it refers to cloth that has been folded over onto itself and tacked down to keep it there. School uniforms, skirts, and kilts come to mind for me when I hear the word. Skirts like that are usually pleated in one direction with all the folds facing the same way. A box pleat, however, consists of 2 folds that face opposite directions. The one called for in this garment is technically an inverted box pleat, since the excess fabric is folded toward the inside of the garment. This nifty little detail will help maintain the linear silhouette of this dress while still giving me a wide enough hemline to take decent-sized steps. The pattern included markings for where the folds of the pleat line up, which was very helpful. I stuck a few pins to keep the folds in place, then, per instructions, I gently pressed them flat. It was at this point that I realized that I had cut my dress back piece with the pattern facing the wrong direction. I could have let you think that I did that on purpose, but I believe in honesty on my channel. And speaking of honesty, I must tell you that I did this next part wrong as well. The instructions clearly state, bias bind top of pleats and tack to side seam allowance to hold in place. I did not do that. I just sewed right over it like some kind of cartoon villain. In my defense, the next sentence reads, if desired, top stitch along folded edge of pleats to hold in place. I also didn't do that, but maybe I saw top stitch and ignored the rest? I am a mystery. Again, this is a trial run of this pattern, so I promise to do it correctly on the real thing. Next up was the collar. The collar is made of 2 pieces of fabric, so that there's no wrong side if it gets flipped up. The first step was to join them together on the unnotched edges, which was 3 out of the 4 sides. Next, I trimmed the seam allowance down quite a bit and clipped off the corners. Then I clipped into the remaining seam allowance at regular intervals along the curved edge. All of this was done so that when the piece was turned right side out, it would lay flat. In order to get the corners nice and sharp, I grabbed my nearest set of enormous, relatively blunt bamboo knitting needles. Yes, I have more than one set. I hope to do some knitting videos in the future. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in watching that sort of thing. Then I gave the collar a thorough, if tedious, press, ensuring that the seams were as flat as possible. The collar looked great at this point, but from here things got complicated. I should disclaim that Deirdre, the owner of the Vintage Pattern Lending Library, has mentioned on multiple occasions that I should feel free to reach out to her with pattern questions. I am very grateful, but also very stubborn. The directions were simple enough, but I am not as full of sewing know-how as the women of the 1920s were, so when faced with the instructions to simply join collar to dress neck, I was rather puzzled. My first instinct was to match the raw edges with the collar facing the wrong side of the bodice and folding outwards once attached. But the instructions also say, make neat on inside with ribbon. Attaching them this way would have left the raw edges on the outside, so clearly that was wrong. Then I tried keeping the collar oriented in the same way, but facing it to the right side of the bodice. But I couldn't see how it would achieve the folded over look if it was stitched straight onto the front like this. My third attempt was to turn the collar the other way so that the edges were pointing the complete opposite direction of the bodice edges. Intrigued by this plan, I pinned it together, matching the tailor's tacks as I went.
Whispering all the while, I'll always love you as I do today.
Now, I knew that in order to hide all of the raw edges, I would need to make it neat on the inside and outside with ribbon. This clearly did not match the instructions. As much as I would like to say that seeing it on a hanger like this caused me to rethink the plan, it did not. No, I marched on ahead and attached the collar in this configuration. Spoiler alert, this is going to come back to bite me in the future. In the next video, I'll be attaching the contrasting center panel, and having fun with bias tape. I might even fix this collar. Until then, thanks for watching.